This isn't just a story about a bank account. It's about the moment a 13-year-old girl's birthday dream turned into a nightmare and the silent power that was about to be unleashed. Her name was Jessica Williams. At 13, she stood at that delicate age between childhood and the vast, unknown territory of being a teenager. And on this bright Tuesday morning, she was on a mission. It was a mission of independence, a rite of passage she had been planning for months. In her hand, she clutched a thick, cream-colored envelope. Inside was $2,000. It felt like a fortune, and in many ways, it was. $1,200 of it was the result of a year's worth of dog walking, babysitting, and saving every dollar she earned. The other $800 was a fresh, crisp gift from her grandmother for her birthday just last week. This money wasn't just paper to her. It was tangible proof of her hard work and the key to her next big dream: buying a professional-grade camera to pursue her passion for photography. Today, she was going to open her very first savings account. All by herself. She pushed open the heavy glass door of the First National Bank, a grand, intimidating building with marble floors and towering ceilings that made her feel smaller than she already was. The cool, quiet air inside hummed with a seriousness that both thrilled and terrified her. She took a deep breath, the scent of clean paper and old money filling her lungs. This was it. This was what being a grown-up felt like. With a polite, hopeful smile, she approached the counter. "Excuse me," she said to the teller, a woman with Jennifer on her name tag. "I'd like to open my first savings account, please." Jessica slid the envelope across the counter. Jennifer Adams glanced at Jessica, then at the envelope, and her professional smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She picked it up. Her fingers moved with an efficient, almost dismissive flick as she counted the bills. As the pile of 20s and 50s grew, her eyes narrowed. She stopped counting, looked up at Jessica, and the warmth vanished completely from her face. It was replaced by a cold, flat suspicion. The first seed of doubt had been planted, not by Jessica, but in her. The hopeful sparkle in the young girl's eyes began to dim, clouded by a confusion she couldn't yet name. But this initial cold shoulder was nothing compared to the storm that was brewing behind the polished office door of the bank manager, a woman who was about to make a decision that would shatter more than just a young girl's day. For every minute that ticked by, the accusation grew heavier, the room felt smaller, and the hope in Jessica's eyes began to flicker. The question was no longer if she could open an account, but if she could walk out of there a free person. Jennifer, the teller, didn't say another word to Jessica. She simply picked up her phone, murmured something into it, and a moment later, a woman in a sharp gray suit emerged from an office marked Branch Manager. This was Sharon Mitchell. She moved with an air of harried importance, her eyes landing on Jessica not as a potential customer, but as an interruption, a problem to be solved and dismissed. "What's the issue here, Jennifer?" Sharon asked. Her voice clipped. "This girl," Jennifer said, gesturing towards Jessica with her pen, "wants to deposit $2,000 in cash. She says it's hers." The emphasis on "she says" was thick with insinuation. Sharon's gaze fell upon Jessica, a slow, condescending scan from head to toe. She saw a young black girl in jeans and a hoodie, and in her mind, a story had already been written. $2,000? Sharon repeated, picking up the stack of bills as if they were contaminated. She held one up to the light. "Where did a girl like you get this much money?" The phrase hung in the air, a punch to the gut. "Like you." Jessica felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck. "It's mine," she said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "I saved it. From jobs, and my grandma gave me money for my birthday." Sharon let out a short, humorless laugh. It was a sound that didn't seek to share a joke, but to establish dominance. "Right. Your birthday. And what jobs would a 13-year-old be doing to earn this kind of cash?" "I walk my neighbor's dogs," Jessica explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "And I babysit for the family down the street. I have for a whole year. My grandma gave me $800. The rest I saved." Each word of her honest explanation was met with a wall of disbelief. Sharon's cynical smirk never wavered. She was no longer listening. She was building a case in her head. "I find that very hard to believe," the manager said, her tone final. She stacked the money neatly, then slid it and Jessica's school ID, which she had presented as identification, to the side of the counter, away from Jessica's reach. "This money is suspicious, and frankly, this ID looks like it could be a fake." "It's not fake." Jessica's voice rose with panic. "It's my student ID. It's all I have. Please, the money is mine. I worked for it." The situation had shifted with terrifying speed. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was a formal accusation. Her dream of a camera, of independence, was dissolving into a nightmare of fluorescent lights and cold, accusatory stares. She was no longer a customer. She was a suspect. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was only one person she wanted, one person who could fix this. Can I please call my mom?" she asked, her voice trembling. "She can explain. She can tell you." This was the moment that the last bit of humanity in the encounter vanished. Sharon looked at her, a flicker of cruel satisfaction in her eyes. She was enjoying this. "No," she said, her voice sharp and absolute. "We don't need to involve anyone else. You're not calling anyone. This is a police matter now." Isolating a terrified child was a deliberate act of power. To deny her the basic comfort of a parent's voice was to break her spirit completely. As Jessica's eyes filled with tears, Sharon turned her back on the girl and picked up the phone on her desk. Jessica could hear her voice, calm and authoritative, speaking to the 911 dispatcher. It was like watching a movie about someone else, a villain weaving a fiction that was about to become her reality. "Yes, this is Sharon Mitchell, the manager at First National Bank on Elm Street. I have a young black female here in my office. Yes, a teenager. She's attempting to deposit a large sum of counterfeit bills." A gasp escaped Jessica's lips. Counterfeit? She had never said that. "I have her detained in my office," Sharon continued, her voice gaining confidence with every lie. "She's becoming very agitated and aggressive. I need officers dispatched immediately." Aggressive? Agitated? Jessica was frozen, tears streaming down her face, a silent scream trapped in her throat. She was watching her character be assassinated in real time. The world tilted, the hum of the bank fading into a dull roar in her ears. But in that moment, as Sharon's back was still turned, a primal instinct for survival cut through the fog of fear. Her phone was in her pocket. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely control them, but she managed to pull it out, keeping it low, below the level of the desk. Her thumb flew across the screen, her vision blurred by tears. She opened her messages to the one contact that meant safety, that meant home. "Mom," she typed with frantic speed, her fingers fumbling on the glass. "They think I stole the money. At the bank. They called the cops. I am scared. Please come." She hit send. The tiny delivered receipt appeared under the blue bubble of text just as Sharon hung up the phone and turned back around, her face a mask of grim satisfaction. Jessica quickly shoved the phone back into her pocket, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't know who her mother would call or what she would do. She just knew that a signal had been sent. A flare had been launched from the heart of the storm. As the sound of distant sirens grew closer, a chilling wail that signaled the arrival of her new reality, Jessica clutched her phone in her pocket. It was her last lifeline in a situation spiraling out of control. But she had no idea that her simple text message hadn't just called for a parent. It had activated an empire. The bank doors opened, but it wasn't the police who walked in first. It was a woman who moved with a purpose that silenced the entire room, her eyes scanning for one person and one person only. Miles away, in a glass-walled boardroom on the 50th floor of a skyscraper that pierced the city's skyline, the world was a different place. Here, power was not wielded through cruel whispers and baseless accusations. It was commanded through sharp intellect, confident decisions, and the quiet respect of a dozen senior executives. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Angela Rodriguez Williams. She was the picture of corporate authority, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy blue suit. As CEO of the multi-billion-dollar Williams Financial Group, Her world was one of high-stakes negotiations and global market strategies. She was in the middle of dissecting a complex merger proposal, her voice calm and measured, when her personal phone, lying face down on the table, buzzed with a unique vibration she had set for only one person. She paused mid-sentence. Her team looked at her, surprised by the break in her intense focus. With a murmured apology, she flipped the phone over. Her eyes scanned the text from Jesse. "They think I stole the money. At the bank. They called the cops. I am scared. Please come." The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. The formidable CEO vanished. In her place was a mother, and the look that crossed her face was a terrifying mixture of ice and fire. The air in the room grew cold. The executives shifted uncomfortably, sensing the sudden, violent change in the atmosphere. Angela stood up, her movements dangerously calm. "This meeting is over," she said, her voice low but carrying an authority that no one dared to question. "Something has happened to my daughter." Before anyone could respond, she was already moving. She walked swiftly to her office, her heels clicking like a metronome, counting down to an explosion. She made 2 calls. The first was to a man named David, her head of security, a former Secret Service agent. "David," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion except for a chilling clarity. "My daughter, Jessica, is at the First National Bank on Elm and 6th. The police have been called on her. I need you and a team there 5 minutes ago. I want eyes on everything, but do not engage until I arrive. And get me eyes on their internal surveillance. Now." The second call was to her personal lawyer, a man who specialized in corporate litigation but was about to handle a very different kind of case. "Marcus, meet me at the First National on Elm. My daughter is being detained. Bring the full kit. We're going to burn them to the ground." Minutes later, a silent, menacing convoy of 3 black SUVs sliced through city traffic. Angela sat in the back of the lead vehicle, her face a stone mask, her mind a whirlwind of cold, calculated rage. She had tried so hard to give Jessica a normal life, to shield her from the complexities and burdens of their family's immense wealth. In her desire to protect her, she had left her vulnerable to a world that would judge her on sight, a world that couldn't see the bright, wonderful girl, only the color of her skin. When the convoy pulled up to the bank, it was a sight to behold. The vehicles didn't park in the lot. They stopped directly in front of the entrance, blocking the lane of traffic as if they owned the street. People on the sidewalk stopped and stared. 2 imposing men in dark suits emerged from the first and third vehicles, their eyes scanning the surroundings with professional precision. Then, the door of the second SUV opened, and Angela stepped out. She walked through the main doors of the First National Bank as if she were walking into her own living room. The hushed whispers of the bank tellers and customers died instantly. Everyone stared. Her presence was an event, a sudden shift in the gravitational pull of the room. She ignored them all. Her eyes found her daughter immediately. Jessica was standing near the manager's office, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers who had just begun to question her. She was crying silently, her small frame trembling. The sight sent a fresh wave of fury through Angela, so potent it was almost blinding, but she contained it behind a wall of icy composure. She walked directly towards them, her path cutting a straight line across the marble floor. She didn't look at Sharon Mitchell, who had stepped out of her office with a smug, triumphant look on her face. She didn't look at the officers. She looked only at her daughter. Her first words were soft, for Jessica alone. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Jessica looked up, and a relief that flooded her tear-filled eyes was heartbreaking. She could only manage a small, choked sob and a nod. Angela gave her daughter's arm a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise that the nightmare was over. Then, she turned, and her gaze fell upon the 2 police officers. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. "I am Angela Williams, this girl's mother," she said, her voice perfectly level, yet carrying a weight that made both officers stand up a little straighter. "Please explain to me, with extreme clarity, why my 13-year-old daughter is being detained." The officers, momentarily stunned by this woman's sheer force of presence, glanced at each other. One of them, older, with a thick mustache, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we received a call from the bank manager. We're just looking into a report of financial irregularities." It was then that Sharon Mitchell, high on her perceived victory and completely oblivious to the new reality, made the biggest mistake of her life. She stepped forward, puffing out her chest. "Ma'am, I am the manager," she said, inserting herself into the conversation. "And your daughter is under investigation for attempting to pass what we believe to be fraudulent bills. I'd ask you to please step aside and let the officers do their job." Angela slowly turned her head, fixing her eyes on Sharon for the first time. She looked at the manager with a calm, analytical curiosity, as if observing a strange, foolish insect. The audience, the viewers of this unfolding drama, knew everything. They knew the power Angela held. They knew the truth about the money, and this moment of dramatic irony was excruciatingly delicious. They were leaning into their screens, waiting, just waiting for the reveal. Sharon Mitchell looked at the woman standing before her, seeing only an inconveniently well-dressed, protective mother. She had no idea she was actually looking in the face of her own professional judgment day. In the next 5 minutes, every lie would be exposed, every assumption shattered, and the name on the front of the bank would suddenly have a terrifying new meaning for one bank manager. Angela let Sharon's words hang in the air for a long moment, allowing the manager's arrogance to echo in the silent bank. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her power was in her stillness, in the absolute certainty of her position. She gave Sharon a look that was witheringly dismissive, then turned her attention back to the senior police officer. "An investigation based on what evidence?" Angela asked, her tone that of a lawyer cross-examining a hostile witness. "Did you test the bills? Did you find any proof whatsoever to support this allegation?" The officer shuffled his feet. "Well, no, ma'am. We just got here. The manager here." "The manager," Angela interrupted, her voice cutting through his explanation like glass. "The manager made a judgment. A judgment about a child. Let's talk about judgment." She took a small step forward. Her lawyer, Marcus, who had entered silently behind her, now stood at her shoulder, holding a sleek leather briefcase. "I am Angela Rodriguez Williams," she said, her voice resonating with a new, harder edge. The name meant something in the city's financial circles, but it didn't seem to register on Sharon's face. The manager was still operating under the delusion that she was in control. "And," Sharon challenged, crossing her arms, "that doesn't change the fact that—" She was cut off by the bank's main door opening again. A flustered, older man in a rumpled but expensive suit hurried in. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. This was Charles Morrison, the chairman of the board for First National Bank. His eyes darted around the room, landing on Angela with a look of pure dread. "Angela," he breathed, rushing over. "I came as soon as I got your message. What in God's name is happening?" Sharon stared, her mouth slightly agape. "The chairman of the board? Here? Now?" A flicker of uncertainty, the first crack in her smug facade, finally appeared. Angela ignored Sharon completely, addressing Charles directly, though her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Charles, I'm glad you could make it. I was just about to ask your manager here." She gestured vaguely at Sharon, as if she were a piece of furniture, to explain her reasoning for calling the police on my daughter. She paused, letting the weight of the possessive pronouns sink in. "My daughter, Jessica Williams." Charles's face went from pale to ghostly white. He looked from Angela to Jessica, a terrified little girl hiding behind her mother, and back to Angela. He understood immediately. Angela then delivered the final, devastating blow. The sentence that would bring Sharon Mitchell's world crashing down around her. "My full name, for the benefit of your staff," she said, her eyes locking onto Sharon's, "is Angela Rodriguez Williams. My grandfather, Juan Rodriguez, founded this bank 60 years ago. My family's private trust still owns a 60% controlling interest in First National Bank." She let that information settle. The silence in the bank was now absolute, deafening. Every teller, every customer, every security guard was frozen, staring. Sharon's face had collapsed. The arrogance, the smugness, it all melted away, replaced by a raw, naked terror. So, to be perfectly clear, Angela continued, her voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. You haven't just racially profiled a customer. You haven't just illegally detained a minor. You have done so to the granddaughter of the man who built this entire institution from the ground up. And you have made the monumental mistake of doing it right in front of me, your bank's largest single shareholder. Charles Morrison acted swiftly. There was no investigation, no discussion. The damage was catastrophic, and the cause was standing right there in a gray suit. He turned to Sharon, his voice shaking with a rage she had never seen. Sharon, you are fired. Effective immediately. Your network access is revoked. Your career in this city is over. Get your personal belongings from your office. Security will escort you from the building. Now. But Angela wasn't finished. Evidence, she said simply. Her head of security, David, stepped forward with a tablet. On the screen was the crystal-clear surveillance footage from inside the bank, time-stamped. He pressed play. The room watched in silence as the whole scene unfolded again. This time on a screen, stripped of interpretation. They saw Jessica's polite, smiling approach. They saw the teller sneer. They saw Sharon's aggressive posture, her dismissive hand gestures. They saw her physically block Jessica when the girl gestured towards the phone. They saw Jessica, small and scared, crying in the corner as Sharon made the 911 call, her back turned. The visual proof was irrefutable, a silent, damning testament to the manager's malice. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. With the manager's fate sealed, Angela turned her cold, calculating gaze upon the two police officers, who now looked as if they wanted the marble floor to swallow them whole. Her lawyer, Marcus, stepped forward, opening his briefcase. Officers, he began, his voice the epitome of legal professionalism. Your actions here today, based on a report that has been proven to be maliciously false, constitute unlawful detainment and a clear case of racial profiling against a minor. We have the dispatcher's recording of the call. We have the surveillance footage. We have a dozen witnesses. He pulled out a business card. A formal and public complaint will be filed with the Internal Affairs Division and the Civilian Oversight Committee before the end of the day. You will be hearing from my office. I suggest you contact your union representative. You're going to need him. The officers, who had walked in with the casual authority of law enforcement, were now utterly broken. Their careers, their reputations, were flashing before their eyes. The entire power dynamic of the room had not just been shifted, it had been completely and irrevocably inverted. The quietest person in the room, the 13-year-old girl with a dream of buying a camera, had become the most powerful. But firing one manager and reprimanding two officers wasn't the end. For Angela and Jessica, it was the beginning of a much deeper, more important mission. Justice isn't just about one person getting fired. True justice is about changing the system so that no one has to endure the same nightmare again. As security escorted a stunned and weeping Sharon Mitchell out of the bank and into the ruins of her life, the tension in the room finally broke. Charles Morrison was profusely apologizing, promising investigations and reforms, but Angela wasn't listening to him. She was focused on one thing only. She knelt down, wrapping her arms around her trembling daughter, pulling her into a fierce, protective hug. The noise of the bank, the stares of the onlookers, it all faded away. In that moment, they were just a mother and a daughter. "I'm so sorry, baby," Angela whispered into Jessica's hair. "I'm so sorry I let this happen. I was so scared," Jessica sobbed, clutching her mother's suit jacket. "Why did she hate me so much? I didn't do anything." Later that evening, in the quiet comfort of their home, they talked. It was a conversation that was long overdue. Angela finally explained everything. The Rodriguez legacy, the immense wealth, the financial empire she commanded. "I kept it from you because I wanted you to be normal," Angela explained, her voice thick with emotion. "I wanted you to have friends who liked you, not your money. I wanted you to learn the value of a dollar you earned yourself." She looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with a painful wisdom. "But in trying to protect you from one part of the world, I left you completely unprotected from another. I taught you how to be humble, but I never taught you how to fight against prejudice. That's my failure, not yours. That day changed everything. Angela Rodriguez Williams, channeling her fury into action, unleashed the full force of her influence. This was no longer just a personal slight. It was a mandate for change. At First National Bank, the fallout was immediate and sweeping. Under the direct, unblinking oversight of its majority shareholder, the bank didn't just fire one manager. It launched a top-to-bottom overhaul. Mandatory, continuous anti-bias and sensitivity training became a requirement for every single employee, from the tellers to the chairman of the board. A clear, compassionate, and legally sound policy for handling new accounts for minors was written and implemented within a week. Most importantly, a new, independently led ethics committee was formed, with a hotline for customers to report discrimination without fear of reprisal. The police department faced a similar reckoning. The formal complaint, backed by irrefutable evidence, triggered a major internal affairs investigation that was quickly picked up by the local news. The two officers were suspended without pay for 6 months, and the public outcry forced the department to revamp its training protocols and strengthen the power of its civilian review board. And 3 months later, Jessica Williams walked back through the doors of the First National Bank. She was greeted by a new manager, a kind woman who knelt down to speak with her at eye level, who praised her for her diligence in saving her money, and who walked her through the process of opening her first savings account with the respect and excitement she deserved from the very beginning. As Jessica signed her name on the paperwork, a feeling of quiet triumph washed over her. The next day, she walked into a camera store and bought the professional camera she had dreamed of. Holding in her hands, she understood. The fight had never been about the $2,000. It had been about dignity. It had been about the right to exist, to dream, and to be seen for who she was, not what someone assumed her to be. Her mother's power had corrected a terrible wrong, but Jessica's own courage in the face of that wrong had forged a new strength within her, a strength she would carry for the rest of her life. This story is a powerful reminder of the impact we can have. If you believe in the power of storytelling to create change, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share stories like this every week to inspire, to challenge, and to remind us all of our shared humanity. Click here to watch another story about an everyday hero who stood up to injustice.